dead boy has been hunting me down my whole life. On my 18th birthday, I finally understand why. I've always been bound to death. On my 8th birthday, a shadow strode into my house and shot me and my family dead. I remember it vividly. Every detail, every angle, etched and stained and carved into my memory. I sat very still with my knees to my chest, my gaze glued to my siblings. Lily and PJ looked like they were sleeping, and I could almost believe it. But then look at the shadow. From the comfort of my knees, I waited for my brother to lift his head, but his body was so limp, so still, every part of him faltering. My sister's head was nestled in his shoulder, thick beads of red running down her face. They're just sleeping. I could tell myself they were, as long as I didn't look at this splatter of scarlet staining the back of the couch and pointing at their feet. Bang. Mom's body dropped onto the ground. I lunged forward, slamming my hands over my ears. Bang. BJ's head slumped forwards, a teasing smile still frozen on his lips. Bang. Lily gently tipped into PJ like she was going to sleep. Before she closed her eyes, Mom told me to run. I can remember how long I stayed under shattered remnants of Mom's favorite table. The shadow was waiting for me to move, to make a noise. I watched booted feet crunch through glass, getting closer and closer, and slowly, fight or flight began to take over. Making it halfway across the living room, my palms slicked with my mother's blood, I thought I was going to live. Cruel fingers wound their way through my hair and shoved me to my knees. I remember the phantom legs of a spider creeping down the back of my neck when the shadow with no face dragged the barrel of his gun down my spine. Turn around. The shadow had a voice. When I didn't move, the protruding metal stabbed into my neck. Turn around, kid. I did, very slowly. Behind him, my siblings still weren't moving. They were asleep. Lily was still smiling, strawberry blonde, ringlet stained red. I couldn't see PJ's face anymore. Bang. I didn't feel the gunshot. I didn't feel anything. Looking down, I glimpsed slowly, spreading red blossoming like a flower. It felt like being cut from strings. I hit the ground, just like my mother. My body felt heavy and wrong, paralyzed. I remember being unable to scream, unable to cry. The salty taste of metal filling my mouth. It was like being winded. Rolling onto my side, all I could see was flickering candlelight. The air was thick, so hard to breathe. I rolled onto my back, trying to suck in air. The shadow took a step back, opened the front door, and bled into the night. I don't remember the pain, and I don't remember dying. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't conjure words in my mouth. I felt warm and sticky, lying in my own blood. I think I tried to move, but I was so tired. I'm not sure what death feels like because it's like going to sleep. I remember my last shuddering breaths, a lulling darkness beginning to swallow me up. I don't know why I wasn't afraid. Oblivion almost felt like I was sinking into lukewarm depths on a summer's day. Oblivion was in pain, and there was a peaceful inevitability to it. It was endless, nothing I found myself gravitating towards. But before I could envelop myself in that darkness, it was spitting me back out. The next thing I knew, I was in a white room, a slow beeping sound tearing me from slumber. I had a vague memory of slow spreading roses blossoming across my shirt like summer flowers blooming. Everything was white, The walls, the ceiling, and my clothes. Sensation hit me in slow waves. Exhaustion. I felt it tightening its grip around my brain, dragging me back on a mountain of pillows when I tried to jump up. My Aunt May was sitting next to me on a plastic chair, her warm fingers entangled in mine. Aunt May and Mom were practically twins, with the same thick red hair and pale skin. Mom wore her hair in a casual ponytail while May preferred a straight bun. I had to bite back the urge to yank my hand away. Aunt May was asleep, used tissues filling her lap. There was a nurse pottering around, checking my vitals and prodding my arms. My eyes felt heavy. I had to blink several times to keep myself awake. "Charlie?" The nurse's voice was like wind chimes. I pretended not to notice her forced lipstick smile, the way she stood with her arms folded, staring at me like I was one of my cousin's experiments. "You were in an accident, sweetie." The nurse spoke up. I could see her trembling hands. "Just, try and rest, okay?" I wanted to ask where my family was, but I already knew the answer. I think she knew that too. "You died, Charlie." The nurse's voice was eerily cold. "You were dead for 13 minutes. She took slow steps towards me, her eyes growing frenzied, like she couldn't understand me, like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. And it was driving her crazy. I could see it in her twitching hands, her wobbling lips that were trying and failing to appear stoic. "In fact, I just pulled you out of the morgue, honey. I opened up your body bag that I had just zipped up and told your aunt that you were a miracle. I just can't understand." The nurse sounded like she was trying to choke down a laugh or maybe a sob. "Charlotte, you were pronounced dead at 3:02 a.m. from a gunshot wound to the chest." Taking a slow, sobering breath, the nurse tried to smile. "The bullet went through the right ventricle of your heart and severely damaged your left lung, rendering you unable to breathe. Your heart stopped, and after 4 attempts to resuscitate, we called it." Something slimy wound its way up my throat. She began to pace the room. "I did all the paperwork. It took me 2 minutes. Your death certificate was signed. Your body was taken to the morgue to be prepped for transportation. Then I had my lunch, tuna salad with a protein milkshake. I'm not a fan of the chocolate flavor." She shook her head. "Anyway, when I came back to you, you were awake inside your body bag." Her voice was starting to break. "You were, alive, and asked me for apple soda." The nurse moved closer, and yet kept her distance. I could feel myself moving back, panic writhing through me. "So," the nurse spoke calmly, "how the fuck are you still alive, Charlie?" I think I passed out after that. When I woke up again, my head a lot less heavier. The nurse was gone. Slowly, my foggy brain began to find itself and connect dots. My mouth was dry, full of cotton. There was a sudden tightness, a sharp and cruel sting in my wrists. Something sharp was protruding into my flesh. No matter how many times I violently wrenched my arm, it was stuck. It didn't feel right to be able to breathe so easily. I knew the second I woke that my mom was dead. Lily and PJ were dead. And it was like losing them all over again. As clarity came over me, I found my voice, a strangled cry escaping my lips. "Get it out," I whispered in a shrill cry, tugging at the IV in my wrist. I tried to yank the needle from my skin. "Get it out," I shrieked, my gaze glued to the tiny spots of blood staining the insertion point. I could see it again. So much blood. Mom was curled up on the floor, lying in slow, spreading red that wouldn't stop, seeping across her beaded rug. She was all over me, slick on my skin, caked in my fingernails. I couldn't wash her off me. "You're okay, Charlotte." Aunt May's voice came from my right, stabling me to reality. The world started to move again, started to make sense again, when she cupped my cheeks and told me to breathe. When I opened my mouth to ask where my family were, she lightly shook her head and I swallowed my words. Aunt May handed me a glass of water and I drained it in one gulp. She told me I was a miracle. Aunt May didn't say much, and when she did, she broke into sobs. Her eyes were raw from crying, clinging onto me, her shuddery voice reassuring me that I was going to be okay. She told me I would be living with her from now on, before wrapping me into a hug and leaving to get coffee. Once my aunt was gone, another nurse came to prod my IV. I tried to sleep, but the uncomfortable tightness of the needle sticking into my skin and the sterile white lights in my eyes made it impossible. I waited for grief to catch up with me, drowning me in a hollow oblivion I wouldn't be able to claw myself out of. But I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I wanted to know why my family were dead. I wanted to know why I was breathing and their skin was ice cold, rotting. The sudden image of maggots crawling up my brother's nose sent me lurching into a sitting position, my stomach heaving. Reaching for my glass of water, it was empty. The sensation of throwing up felt familiar, almost comforting. Mom was always with me when I was sick, holding my hair back and lulling my hysteria with reassuring murmurs. I was frowning at the trash can by the door, my cotton candy brain trying to figure out if I would be able to make it in time, when a small voice drifted from the doorway, startling me. "I don't want you to come live with us." My cousin was speaking through the door, hiding behind a shock of dark brown curls. Jude was the only brunette in our family. The rest of us were redheads. I wasn't sure why he was dressed up like a ghost, draped in a white cloak that was way too big for him. Jude was a weird kid. His mother and my auntie had inherited the family house, so in his mind, that made him superior. Jude made it clear he didn't like his cousins, refusing to let us play with him and banning us from family gatherings. When the adults were drinking cocktails and losing their awareness, Jude ordered us around. The time we did play with him, our cousin showed us his spider collection, with a raccoon brain he kept in a jar. PJ was convinced our younger cousin was a serial killer. Several months later, he'd happily showed us the roadkill he'd been growing bacteria on under his bed. Jude's experiments were worrying. He stuffed mushrooms down my brother's ears while he was sleeping to, and I quote, "recreate The Last of Us." When Lily had a nosebleed during Thanksgiving dinner, Jude collected all her bloody tissues and refused to tell us where he'd put them and what he had done with them. Fast forward 2 months and I found them under a nest of spiders. Jude was trying to adapt the spiders to be able to feed on human blood. I was surprised my cousin hadn't immediately demanded to see my siblings' dead bodies for autopsy. Jude stepped into the room, shuffling his feet. "I'm sorry about Lily and PJ and Aunt Ivy," he mumbled, glaring at the floor tiles. My cousin made no move to offer real sympathy, instead speaking to the floor. "But I don't want you to come live with us." Jude lifted his head, looking me dead in the eye. "I don't like you, Charlie. I want you to stay away." Before I could reply, he stepped back like I was diseased.